Welcome back to Life After Prison. This is the final episode of our 4-part mini-series where we explore rehabilitation in the prison system. We're looking at what works, what gets in the way, and what could be done differently.
Over the past 3 episodes, we've spoken to experts about prison design, daily life inside, and mental health, with voices from people with lived experience woven throughout.
And now in this final episode, we're bringing back our experts. Roland Karthaus, the architect exploring how prison design can support rehabilitation. Jenny Okolo, the occupational therapist looking at daily life and neurodiversity inside prison. And Dr Graham Durcan, a researcher at the Centre for Mental Health.
And you'll be hearing their responses when I ask them to look ahead. What current projects give them hope for the future of rehabilitation? And if rehabilitation was really at the heart of the system, what could prisons look like in the years to come? I think one of the most important conversations for me, because we talk about all the things that we think are challenging, but what can we do about it? And I always think, we always talk about it, or we're moaning about it. I wouldn't say moaning, it's not the right word, but
complaining.
Moaning and complaining. But what can be done and what can we actually do about it? And sometimes I feel super helpless and a little bit hopeless. So I feel like we can't actually do much, let's say. But this is why I wanted to hear what these experts think the future looks like, and also what the future could look like if we implemented certain things.
No, I'm with you on that, Jules. Like what we've done in this mini-series is compile all of these voices, opinions, expressions of the experts that we featured in the mini-series, which shows the importance of having allies in the system, people who are there to support us from a service provider standpoint, but also as an advocate for systemic change. Because as you said, we can talk, complain, moan, whatever about the system and how things need to improve and what needs to change. But what's the point of saying all these things if we can't implement or improve it or make changes? So having these experts express what they're saying alongside the voices of people like us with lived experience is the perfect combination.
I am so here for that. So throughout the episode, you'll hear clips from some of our past Life After Prison contributors. Kate Fraser talking about pilot schemes for women in prison. Alex South, an ex-prison officer, discussing the impact of cuts. And Molly Ellis talking about how doing therapy in prison changed things for her.
All right, so let's get into it.
My name's Roland Karthaus. I'm an architect. I've been practicing as an architect for 25 years.
What gives you hope that prisons and justice can change for the better?
I think when I've been talking about prisons, I've been focusing on the men's prison estate, but there's actually been some quite bigger innovations in the women's justice sector and also in young people's institutions. So there's some really good examples of trauma-informed design for women in custody and also education-focused trauma-informed design for young people as well. So I think outside of the men's estate, there's some really positive things going on, and maybe it would be good if we could learn more from that and apply it more broadly to the men's estate.
What's one principle that should guide the future of justice and rehabilitation?
I think you have to put people at the center of it, right? Like I'm on here talking as an architect and we started talking about buildings, and buildings, they're part of the picture, right? They can either make things easier or they can make things harder. Buildings can't rehabilitate people. They can only adjust the conditions. And the 2 examples I was just giving of trauma-informed design in women's justice sector and in the youth sector, they're examples of how if you put people at the center of the design process, then you're more likely to get buildings that can help create the right sort of conditions. So I think that would be the principle, put people first. And that's what we were trying to do in the research in Berwyn. We were saying, I'm an architect, I'm an expert in buildings, but the real experts in how buildings work are the people that live and work in them. So we should start by asking them.
It just makes sense.
Yeah.
Create something for women by women.
Yeah, absolutely.
That will support women.
Yeah.
And help women.
Well said.
And that's it, because we have that opportunity, don't we, with the Lord Chancellor making this announcement about the Women's Justice Board. We have an opportunity to pilot something that then could be replicated across the male estate.
Yeah.
We can do it because there's only 3,000 women Can't do it with the, those huge numbers
the
of men.
80,000 odd.
But we can do it. We could pilot something that's really significant, that takes into account, why people are offending in the first place. Because I've never met anybody who's, says, I'm going to do something today that's going to get me sent to prison, So
it's the underlying issues. Yes.
Exactly. So we need to be looking at that. And those are the things that, all of these kind of great organisations do support people with, that they, they don't have a focus on, then they're not being measured against reducing reoffending. They have other measures, so outcome-driven measures. They're looking at how they can support people, what the support that people need, because we want to listen to what people coming out of prison say to us, that they say, I need this, I don't need this, I don't need that.
Tailoring that support.
That's it, that bespoke service.
I'm Graham Durcan. I worked in and around mental health for, I think, something like that, 43, 44 years. And since the mid-1990s, I've been a researcher.
What would you say about a prison that is for rehabilitation? What would that look like, and what would we focus on?
To successfully work with people, you've got to be able to communicate with them, and that requires a number of things, and particularly in prisons. So prisons aren't normal populations. You won't find this anywhere else in society where you've got so many people with multiple and complex sort of vulnerabilities. That's the nature of the prison population. And the thing we talked about earlier is that we want the staff to have a really sort of good understanding about the ranges of vulnerabilities and how that affects how someone behaves, how they think, how they respond to you, how they might interpret you. If you've got a good understanding of that and knowing how to communicate with someone, you're likely to avoid conflict and you're more likely to engage that person. And it's really important. If you want people to rehabilitate, they've got to want to rehabilitate. They've got to engage in that process. So as well as having a whole bunch of rehabilitation services, I think one of the basic building blocks is really just understanding the population that you're working with and understanding how they might respond, how they might interpret things. It gives you a better chance of being successful and building a relationship with that person. And the other sort of factors to that is you need to have time to build a relationship with a person. So if we've got a shortage of staff, if you've got fewer staff in the wing than perhaps we might have done in the past, you have less opportunities for conversations. You have less opportunities to spot vulnerabilities. So those are quite critical things. It's about investing in staff training. All of those are quite critical. And then you have a range of services. Not everyone will want to engage, but I'm pretty sure a lot more people would want to engage successfully in rehabilitation if they saw that as something that could help them.
Are there any current projects or pilots or things that are going on in the pipeline right now that make you hopeful about the future of our prisons and mental health care?
Yeah, there are some. I've been involved in a pilot in one prison, which in a small way, it's shown how to work quite successfully with prisoners who've experienced trauma. That's a great example. I've worked just a few years ago, I was involved in a project which involved bringing therapy dogs into prison, and that had a dramatic effect. It doesn't work for everyone, but it had a dramatic effect on some of the people. The trouble is these tend to be sort of pilot schemes, etc. And once the pilot money is done and the project's over, they tend to have been small scale and they don't get picked up on. So that's something. We need to do pilots and then be brave and invest and try and upscale them. I'm working in something at the moment with a version of the Reconnect scheme called Enhanced Reconnect, which looks quite positive. And that's working with the sort of a higher risk group of people. And the research project is really going to help hopefully direct where that will go in the future. It's trying to pick up some of the issues, etc. So there are a number of schemes that have worked from time to time. We tend to have they operate like islands of excellence in certain places. We don't seem to be able to scale them up to have a bigger benefit for a large group of people.
So across the course of my career, I did not feel safe at one with Scrubs.
Ooh.
Okay.
It's the brutally honest answer
How
to that.
long were you there for?
2 years. The first year was much better. The second year was when the voluntary early departure scheme was brought in for the more experienced officers. And we lost a lot of experience in a really short amount of time.
What was this? Sorry.
It's called VEDS. It was basically like early retirement.
Okay.
But it was offered to lots of officers.
Right.
On the old
contract, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So loads left because you wouldn't.
That was what was that, like 2015? 14, 15?
Yeah, exactly. They brought it in a bit earlier than that, but it took time for the effects to be felt. But I was at Scrubs around 2015 and it hit Scrubs really, really hard. And it coincided with some of the cuts to general governors' budgets, which meant that things like repairs to cells were delayed or didn't happen. It meant like there wasn't as much uniform for staff.
Whoa.
Yeah, new officers often had to have second-hand uniform. We'd be asked if we had any of our old stuff at home that we could bring in.
Mad.
Yeah, so it hit really hard. I think just workplace conditions in general are so important, and for some reason, prison, we skim over that.
My name is Jenny Okolo. I am a occupational therapist.
You were part of a BBC documentary and you explored the future of prisons. What stood out to you most during this experience?
Ooh, so many things. I'll pick two. So the documentary was sort of set. We explored prisons in Norway, in the Netherlands, so those type of countries, and comparing and contrasting the approach to prisons. And their approach generally was very much therapeutic and more on the side of rehabilitation, which is what we're trying to implement here as well. But a massive thing that sort of stood out to me was just the focus on post-prison discharge as well, and some of the issues that they saw that contributed to, and I can never say this word, recidivism.
Well done. You taught me something.
And so that was a massive issue that they found. So they found that housing tended to be a massive issue, and they worked so much on implementing those things before somebody was released from prison. So I think that was something I really took from that documentary, and just seeing how we could, I guess, implement that more here. So yeah, it's really nice to see the different angles that prisons are coming from, and also how the mental health system works within the prison. So here if somebody has a mental health condition that can't be managed in prison, they get transferred out. And also we have integrated systems in prison as well, whereas theirs is very much separate too. So just seeing the slight differences was quite cool.
I think when I did the therapy, that's what I did at East Sutton Park. So the governor actually said to me, look, Molly, I really think it's important that you do some therapy. And I was always anti-therapy until I did therapy. And then I was like, that's what saved my life, because look, it's so complicated. But I think in my mind, acceptance is real, right? Acceptance is a real thing. And I think what therapy showed me was acceptance. I can't change. So I can either stay in that negative mindset, or I can help other people never have to go through what I went through. And there's only two options with that, right? You either live a horrible life or you try and live a better life. And I think for me, I've lived that horrible life, like 10
this
years.
is so special to hear, because earlier in the podcast, you were talking about how you didn't want to give any love.
Mm.
And how you want to do is
I'm
love.
healed, baby.
That is so talk us a little bit more about therapy.
Yeah. So I did a therapy where it takes you back in time. So it will take you back in time to relive the events that created the trauma in the first place. It took me quite a while to even get into that mind where you can actually shut off, close your eyes, and actually get to that point where you're reliving it again. But I'd actually recommend it to a lot of people, because that's what changed my life. That's what showed me acceptance. So I think for me, a big part of my therapy was accepting life for what it was. And we can either be a product of the environment that they're creating for us, or we can thrive to do better.
So what can we learn, us UK? How can we learn from these other countries?
I think the main thing, I guess, is the therapeutic approach and their emphasis on the fact that it's not just a responsibility of health professionals, it's everybody involved. So that's from, like I said, the officers to those up top, clinical or not. And I think that's the culture that we need to continue implementing in here. So culture was a massive thing, and just moving away from that punitive approach.
I feel like the future of prisons is so important, and how they're going to look and what they're going to be and how many, because it kind of, for me, it's like, how do we see it going? And, we see it growing. And for me, that scares me, because I feel like we're still not tackling those kind of like fundamental issues. If you were designing a future prison system from the ground up, what would you prioritize?
I would prioritize therapeutic interventions within prison setting and prepping people from the get-go, no matter how long the sentence is, but just prepping them from the get-go in terms of what the future could look like and tackling it from there. So that could be working on certain skill sets, working on the trauma side of things, and looking at the more holistic picture of that person. That's the first thing that I would love to implement and just dash loads of money into that. And then also that would have a positive knock-on effect on overcrowding as well, which is a huge problem here. They haven't got enough prisons as well. So why not start from the beginning in terms of trying to rehab a lot of these people? And that could be from a psychological sense, that could be more neurodevelopmental, whatever the case may be. We need to get to the root of the issue. So I'd love to have more of an emphasis on that and have more resources in outsourcing specialists to come in, and perhaps those with lived experience too.
That was the final episode of our mini-series. It's been incredible hearing from Roland, Jenny and Graham about what gives them hope for rehabilitation and what prisons could look like if rehabilitation was really prioritised.
Indeed, Jules. So looking back over the series, we've learnt a lot. The way that prisons are designed, the daily routines inside, and the mental health support available all have a huge impact on whether someone can rehabilitate. And that meaningful change that requires seeing people as more than just offenders, but as individuals with potential for change.
Something I've really felt before, and I'm going to bring it up now, that we haven't really touched on is just about how the whole dynamic of prisons and the culture, the ethos, really needs a revamp. You know what I mean?
No, 100%.
And there's so many elements of prison. I just feel like all of it needs, it needs a change. And I feel like this miniseries really highlighted for me that staff really need to have a good understanding of people's needs in prison and the ranges of these needs. I feel like it will avoid conflict. It will help build the relationships, help the communication, which is going to help this, what do you call it?
It's just going to help all the wheels move together.
You know, the core, the actual core of what prison is there for and how it runs. I think that when that changes, things will start to change.
No, everything you said makes sense. I think if that is the picture, the bigger picture, and all those pieces are in place, then why can't prison be about rehabilitation? Why can't improved communication, improved understanding of people with complex needs and how to best support people? How can that not make a change? How can it not make things work? However, it's about, and like we said before, the investment, it's about policy change, it's about people's attitudes changing, the workload being evenly distributed.
But this is why I'm saying there's so many elements to it. There actually is. That's why the whole thing needs a revamp. Yeah. But I feel like also what was really good in this episode was Graham talking about how people need to want to rehabilitate, and how is someone going to want to rehabilitate if they are not engaged in that process? And that engagement comes from, that relationship between an officer and a prisoner. And the person in prison needs to understand the benefits and see the light after prison. And I just feel like that relationship is so important.
It's very important. And there's 2 points here that are really important. One, you have to be in an environment that supports you rehabilitating or supports your rehabilitation. And also you got to want it yourself. You have to want it. We've said this many times. You're going to have to take the personal responsibility. You have to take the onus. And it works both ways. We can't just sit here and say, the system's broken, it needs to change this, it needs to change. But we also have to change too. We also have to change our perspectives. We also have to change our attitudes and our actions towards rehabilitation too. If we're going towards it and fighting for it and pushing for it, then our attitudes, our behaviors, our thinking has to change too, as well as all the other stuff within the system as well.
But of course, and I agree. I really agree with that, and I think people inside listening should know that, right? But I also think when you're in that environment, it's really tough to want to change, and people inside probably need a bit of support, which they probably feel like they're not getting.
True.
And I think as simple as being able to have a conversation with somebody. So, for example, if somebody does have a mental health issue or a mental health problem or complex needs, first of all, you need to be able to talk to that person to even get like a first step. So that environment that person is in needs to want to help support that. And at the moment, I just don't feel like it's there. And the fact that, I'm going to bring it up again, the fact that staff don't have training is crazy.
It is.
That needs to change.
It is. And the whole environment, not just of like in terms of people, but physically how buildings can be adjusted or how buildings can adjust the conditions of rehabilitation. Like putting people at the center of the design process, having trauma-informed practices, how, like, for example, the pilots in YOIs and women's prisons have shown great results when you do that. Why can't you just basically take that evidence and then roll it out and test it in the male adult estate? Because like, you know what I'm saying? It's common sense. If it worked there, why can it not work elsewhere?
Well, exactly that, what Kate Fraser was saying about women's needs and putting people at the center, like we need to figure it out. But also Roland saying the exact same thing, asking the people that are living and working in these conditions what works and what they need. Why would we not be doing that? And everybody you ask that is in prison, okay, I say everybody.
Most people
you ask working in prison and the prisoners probably say it's not working.
Probably say we could do this better.
Yes.
Or that better. Or
So
why isn't this like that? Yeah.
It just baffles me still why there is such a misunderstanding and a misconnection of it all.
Having said that, Jules, what gives me hope though is that there seems to be some sort of momentum that's building up with the influx of lived experience and learnt experience collaborating, like to bring about systemic change. It shows that people are looking at things from different perspectives and angles that can only make huge differences if, and this is a big if they're listened to in the decision-making process.
I agree. And I think, lived experience, we speak about this all the time, how important that is. And we do hear it more so. And we do hear incredible organizations talking about how they love having lived experience people working with them. So I have to bring some positivity on that because it is very true. So also in this episode, you heard from Kate Fraser sharing insights about pilot schemes for women, Alex South reflecting on the effects of funding cuts, and Molly Ellis. Their perspectives show how both policy and practice shape what's possible in the system. And of course, we have to look at other prisons doing well, Norway, Scandinavian prisons. This is something we can learn from and take from. And I asked Jenny why these prisons might be doing well. And she spoke about, having a more therapeutic approach and that rehabilitation was their focus. And we have to just look at the data and statistics at how the reoffending rate is so much lower in these prisons. And of course, it's because of these factors and because rehabilitation is such a primary focus. And if we're talking about things that we can learn from and do, why are we not doing that either?
I think we've spoken about this in the past and looked at various examples. And I believe I mentioned a while ago in one of our episodes about, I can't remember who it was, but I think it was someone to do with prisons in either Sweden or Norway. And he came over to address professionals in the UK and was saying how they have a different cultural approach to prisons, and how people are treated within prisons and how rehabilitation is the focus and how it's a bit different set up to us and what that does for them in terms of reoffending rates, right? And I think it's quite clear and I think it's quite obvious to see that putting certain things in practice make a huge difference. But the only thing with that is, and this is what you're saying, like you said earlier, about a whole reset, it's going to take a major cultural reset in terms of how and different levels, prisons, probation, and society in general, how we look at rehabilitation. Do you get what I'm saying?
Well, that does remind me also what Jenny mentions is it's not just up to the healthcare professional to provide this service and support that person. It needs to be everybody involved in that situation. So
multi-agency approach, right?
Multi-agency approach, so that we're all supporting that same kind of thing. But I don't think we are right now. You know, they want professionals to come in, do their job, go, maybe not even pay for professionals to be there. You know, this needs to be a very holistic approach.
Facts. Like, for example, if therapy was available in prisons, like, for example, I remember that conversation you had with Molly, and that was a great conversation, by the way. She spoke about how the type of therapy she received, and surprisingly, it was pushed by a governor. Like, a governor kind of urged and pushed her towards doing it. She spoke about how beneficial it was in overcoming and dealing with her trauma. You know, she spoke about how it's then gone on to enable her to support others and give back once she went back in the community.
Yeah, her conversation was emotional. It was pretty deep. She was talking about how therapy actually saved her life. And when you're talking to somebody that has gone through something like that, and you know what, it is a little bit more emotional for me maybe with Molly because I was in prison with her and I saw part of her journne, you know.
Yeah, you was there.
So when she was talking to me about how, you know, that actually saved her life, like, this is deep stuff. This is life-changing. This is life-changing for that person in prison. And yeah, just having that, it's just an incredible episode. So if you haven't heard it already, definitely check it out. It's an episode of Molly Ellis.
Yeah. Before we go though, Jules, we also wanted to let you know about Cellmate to CEO, the new show from the Prison Radio Association with Tony Supreme, which will be on our feed for the next 4 weeks. It's all about hearing from people who have been through the criminal justice system and are now taking charge of their future as entrepreneurs, CEOs, and senior leaders. It connects closely to many of the themes that we explored in this series too.
And just a shout out, because you are number one in this episode. Are you the first guest?
Something like that, you know what I'm saying?
Number one meaning first guest, not the number
best,
one.
Not the number one, not the best.
Participant. I'm not going to let your head get too big.
Never that.
But yeah, you are on our first episode, so I can't wait to hear that actually. So keep an eye out for that. And as usual, we'll leave links to any organisations and support services in the description below.
So once again, thanks for joining us for this mini-series of Life After Prison. We hope it's given you, a new perspective and insight on rehabilitation and on the potential for change within the prison system.
We'll be back straight after Cellmate to CEO with more episodes. But for now, thanks for listening and we'll see you next time.
Take care.